Today we're going to do something different. I'm going to be digging into some data around umpiring, more specifically balls and strikes. Are umpires getting worse? Is it just our perception? What's going on there? And so what inspired this is, let's pull it up, is this tweet that I saw yesterday from Dalton Feely. He's one of the guys over at John Boy. They do great work over there. He is a Diamondbacks fan, and the pitch he's calling out is this number 7 here. That was thrown to Gurriel on a full count, and it's about a foot outside the zone. It was called a strike. They've got a runner in scoring position. That's damaging. That's seriously damaging to the team. And if you're on Twitter at all, you see stuff like this all the time. You see a lot of people complaining about improperly called balls or strikes. And part of that is that we now have the data to actually confirm what we're seeing, right? You know, several years ago, these graphics didn't exist where we're able to see exactly where the pitch went and complain about it. But I wanted to dig in and see if this is something that we're just seeing or imagining, or if it's something that is actually getting worse. Are umpires getting worse at calling balls or strikes? Now this is important because we're getting closer and closer every year to being able to call balls and strikes automatically. This is already happening in the minor leagues, all the way up through AAA, and this takes two forms. One is it actually replaces the umpire making the call, and the system determines whether it's a ball or strike live. And the other one is a challenge system, which is something Dalton mentioned in his tweet, and it would function sort of like tennis's challenge system. If you watch any tennis, you're familiar with it, but in short, in this case, the team, the manager, would get a certain number of challenges per game, and they could use all of them, none of them, and they keep them if they get the challenge right. So if you challenge a call and the call's overturned, you don't lose one. But if you challenge a call and it's upheld, if you challenge the correct call, then you lose one. And they may add other wrinkles, like maybe you lose a mound visit or something if you use up all of your challenges. But in one form or another, this appears to be coming to MLB very soon, in the next year or two probably. Now, to dig into this, I went to the best source on umpire data, on ball and strike data, and that is Scorecards. Umpire Scorecards, they have a very popular Twitter page, and they just tweet out these graphics for every game the morning after, detailing scores, how accurate the ump is, if they're favoring one team or the other, the calls that are going to be the most impactful on the game. And so, like, here's an example. Here's a very good umpire performance. All right, this is from Tuesday the 14th. This is Lance Barrett. 99% accurate. All right, he made 2 mistakes on taken pitches. Both were strikes kind of at the edge of the zone that he called balls, and they were both in relatively insignificant counts. Right, we had one on the first pitch of an at-bat, that's the number 2, and the number 1 is on 0-1 count. So they really didn't contribute to how the game flowed at all. This is a very, very good umpire scorecard. Now we're going to look at another one. It's also Lance Barrett. It's from Friday, and it's a really, really bad umpire scorecard. All right, here he had 19 missed calls, all as you would expect, right around the zone. He basically had a wider strike zone to the right and narrower to the left. He was calling a lot of balls off here to this corner that were actually catching the zone, and out here he was calling a lot of strikes that were actually outside the zone. Some of these were actually pretty impactful, right? If we look here, he basically handed a run to Seattle. They didn't need it, right? They won 8-1, but you get cases like right here, right? You get a pitch with the bases loaded, and a pitch that should strike this batter out and go to 2 outs is called a ball, and the pitcher's now got to work a full count. And so that's a very impactful pitch call, and it's the incorrect one. It's the type of call, right? It's this number 1 here. It catches the zone. It's almost entirely in the zone. All right, so it's objectively the wrong call, but it's a very impactful wrong call. Now, for each of these games, you can come over to Scorecards to their website. And so this is that Friday game, first percentile in accuracy. So it's one of the worst games in their database, basically. Expected accuracy, 90.4%. So this was actually a very difficult game. If we remember back to the strike zone map, a lot of those pitches are right around the zone, just catching a little bit of the zone. It's difficult calls. So all things considered, it's not a terrible game. It's a bad game, but it was a difficult game at the same point. Now, this total run impact is something I'm also looking at. This is one of the worst games in their entire database on total run impact. And so that basically means that the calls that he's making that are incorrect are impacting the game more than some of the other calls that he could have gotten wrong, right? In the first one, the one where he's really successful, he missed 2 calls, and they're only very insignificant calls, right? It's a first pitch of an at-bat, and then it's an 0-1 pitch. And here, we've got a couple 2-2 counts, we've got probably some 3-1 counts. And so while the net favoring is 1 run to Seattle, overall, it's 3.82 total runs of impact. So it's basically he's missing a lot of calls at important times in the game when we really want umpires to actually get a lot of stuff right. Now, the site has all sorts of other interesting information. So one thing you can look at is you can look through the actual games. And you can see, right, this is Tuesday the 14th, their games. You can see who umped, home and away teams, the scores. This is the pitch count, incorrect calls. Actually, this isn't the pitch count. This is the number of pitches called, right? So anything that is swung at, made contact with, hits the batter, that doesn't count. Those aren't calls that the umpire's making. So it's only looking at their calls. This is the expected and correct calls. Correct calls, you get their accuracy, their consistency, which is kind of how often they're inside this zone that you saw on the strike zone. Scorecards generates those. You get your favoring, how heavily they favor the home or away team, and then your total runs of impact. You can also look for individual umpires. So for this year, these are the umpires who have performed the worst relative to their expected accuracy. This is their accuracy above or below expected. So Scott Berry has been the umpire behind the plate for 9 games, and on average, he's 2% less accurate than umpire scorecards would expect. He's not having a really good year. His average total runs of impact, 1.7, somewhat high. Now, all the way at the bottom here, we've got a couple guys who've only umped 1 game, but then you get someone like Quinn Wolcott, who's 2% better than we expect. So all sorts of interesting data in here, and then you can also look at teams. You can look at teams, how heavily they've been favored on average. So the Guardians, the Yankees, the Mets, generally heavily favored by the umpires. Less favored, you get kind of your worst teams mostly, right? You've got Baltimore down here, who's a good team that seems to be getting shafted a little bit by the umps. But then you've got bad teams, the Cardinals, the White Sox, the A's down here, who are kind of getting the shaft by the umps. Now what I did is I took all of this game data here since the start of the 2015 season. So they got all regular season games and postseason games from 2015 to the present. I chose to start there. That's when StatCast was launched at all 30 MLB stadiums. And so that's where we're going to get more accurate pitch data, because that's when they set up all that technology. And I brought it all into R. Now, R is a language for statistical analysis. You don't really have to worry about what's over here, but it's just what I use to generate these plots over here. And so what we have here is, by year, the average accuracy per game. And so you can see the first couple years that they were tracking this, the accuracy wasn't great. Now, I'm assuming maybe that's because the technology wasn't amazing, but it's been steadily getting better every single year. Umpires have actually been improving. Right? If we even say that the first 3 years, let's say we throw them out and they're no good because the tech isn't as good and they've perfected it after that, we still see a trend from below 93% every game, now upwards of 94% last year. This year we've taken a bit of a dive. It is a smaller sample size. We've got over 2,000 games to work with in a normal season. We're around 600 right now, just because we're only about a quarter of the way into the season. But we have taken a small dip. Now keep in mind, we are heavily zoomed in here, right? This is just the range from 90 to 95%. We've dipped from 94.1 to 93.8% accuracy. So that is not that many calls worse. But it is a troubling sign, to say the least, that it appears that we're trending down. But it is small enough, in theory, we wouldn't notice it. But what I wanted to look at next is the average run impact of every game. Is this something we're noticing because it's happening in more crucial game situations? And so the answer there is a little bit, yes. Right? We see the same trend the first 3 years of StatCast, where we've got kind of inflated numbers. I'm going to chalk that up to the tech again not being perfect, but we see a pretty steady downward slope starting in 2018 through last year, and then we see a tick up again this year. We're kind of closer to 2021's numbers than we are to last year's numbers. So this is another concerning sign. We're seeing that umpires are ever so slightly on the margin, making worse calls in crucial situations. Then my next thought was, maybe they're just getting more work. Is it possible that for whatever reason this year, we're getting less swings, we're getting less contact or whatever, and umpires are actually having to make more calls than in years past, right? Because in that case, we would expect probably a higher failure rate and a higher impact on the score of the game, right? So this is the last plot I generated, and this kind of jumps around a lot. We are basically exactly where we have been for the last decade as far as the number of pitches called per game, and it's in the mid 150s. So that is not the answer. The unfortunate thing is I don't really have an answer here as to why they're getting worse, but it's something that, they're on the way out. They're going to be replaced sooner or later by the automated strike zone or by the challenge system, and the fact that they are getting worse this year is not a good sign for them. Anyway, let me know down in the comments if you like this video. If there's other sort of data things you want to see me explore. This is something that I have done in the past, but just not on YouTube. So if you want to see more of this, let me know. I really enjoy digging into stats, creating visualizations like this. It's something I really enjoy. So let me know if you want to see more. Anyway, if you made it this far, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you never miss another upload, and I'll see you all next time.